Hello and welcome to this CCWM 601-701 tutorial. This is a very simple tutorial written in Objective-C which is intended to outline the model view controller pattern used in iOS development. And all we're going to do is build a simple application which is Hello World application, where the user can press the button and get a message saying Hello World. So what we're going to do is we're going to open Xcode. This is Xcode 6, and we're going to build an iOS application and choose a single view application for the template. And we're just going to call this Hello World. Put in the other details, the organization identifier and so on. The language we're going to use for this example is going to be in Objective-C, but the Swift version is pretty much identical. We're going to use iPhone as a device. We don't need to switch on core data. Okay, just create this somewhere on your desktop or wherever you wish to put your project. Okay, we'll support landscape left and right. I'm just looking at this here, and portrait. And we'll set the layout correctly for that. Okay, so let's switch to our storyboard. You can see we've got a view controller here. I'm just going to expand this out. I'm going to change the size of this just to make it a little bit narrower. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all is lay out our components. So we're looking at what has been created from the template, and we can see we have a view controller here, the header file for it, and the implementation file, the M file for it. And that's all you get from this standard template. So notice the word view controller. Okay, this is the controller part of the MVC model, but the view controllers also own a view. So you're not going to see the view pulled out as a file, although it's a perfectly legitimate class to have within your projects. In this case, the view controller itself has a view, and you can access this view by saying self.view, as we can see. Back to the storyboard then. So we're just going to lay out our UI elements on here, and I'm just going to put a button down near the top. We're going to maximize that just to make it the length of the device, the width of the device. And what I'll do is I will also add some constraints. So I'm just going to make sure that it sits horizontally in the container. Add that constraint, and then if you go to the third one along, which is this resolve auto layout issues, we're just going to add our missing constraints. Okay, that solves the problem of the button moving around if we either rotate the device or we change the device to a different configuration. I'm going to put our label down, which is going to give us a message. Okay, so we'll just say message goes here. Again, I'm going to just change some of the properties of this. I'm going to align this in the center, and I'm also going to allow the message to be the width of the device as well. Just sort out the constraints. So again, I just want this to sit horizontal in the center, and then I'll automatically add any missing constraints. Of course, you can add these constraints manually, but for most occasions, allowing the Xcode to fill in the missing constraints usually does a good job. Okay, so we're just going to test this. Okay, so we can see if I rotate into landscape. These sit nicely on left and right landscape, and there we are, back again. That seems fine. Okay, so the purpose of this particular tutorial is just to do the simplest MVC implementation that we can do. So what I'm going to think about now, before connecting any outlets or providing any actions, we're going to think about the model. Well, the model here is simply a message. In this case, we probably want the message to say hello world, because that's kind of the point of the exercise. However, it could be any generic message that needs to be set to the user. So the thing we want to model in this case is just simply a message. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our model class first. So if we go to the left-hand pane here, which is our directory structure, I'm going to right-click this and I'm going to add a new file. The sort of file I want to add is an iOS file, source file, and I want to add a Cocoa Touch class because this will give me the header file and the implementation file together. So I'm going to click next. So you can see by default this is suggesting I wanted a class of a ViewController, which I don't. I just want something which is a simple model, so I'm just going to call this hello, and the subclass of it, therefore, we just want to be NSObject, okay, which is the root object of all objects within Objective-C. Language is iPhone, and I can just click next. Okay, make sure you set the target, which is hello world, and we create that, and that'll put these two files in the directory, and here they are. So we've got hello.h, hello.m. Quite a nice idea if you're using lots of models to create an extra group within hello world. You can right click that and you can say new group, which gives you a new folder, so you can contain your models in one place. Xcode is particularly good at finding files, unlike some IDEs where if you put things in folders then you have to work your way in code directly to them and so on and so forth. So it actually doesn't matter too much where you put the files as long as they're within the hello world folder structure here. So we have our two files, and then all that remains to do here is to populate our files in the header. Because we want access to this model from our ViewController, it means that we have to put our properties that we want access to inside the public interface, and the public interface is the header part of an Objective-C file. So what we want to do is, using the app property, is we want a string, which we're just going to call message. Okay. And there we have it. And that's really all we need to do with this model. It's an extremely simple model. And what we can do with this model object is we can either set a string on it or we can get a string. Remember, in Objective-C, if we use app property, non-atomic strong, ns string message, then the compiler will automatically create a getter and setter for us. So unless we intend to write a custom getter or setter, we need to do no more work at this point. Non-atomic is a reference to it being not thread safe, and strong, if you remember, is to do with the way the memory is going to be managed. Okay, so we're done with that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to return back to our storyboard now we've created our simple model. If we go to this part of the IDE up here, you can see there's these two linked circles, which is the assistant editor. If we click on this, then Xcode, if it's set to automatic, will show us the ViewController code that relates to this particular ViewController on the storyboard. How can I check I've got the right ViewController? Well, if you open this pane, click on the view controller and you can actually inspect. If you go to this little tab here, it says show the identity inspector, and you can see the class is actually ViewController, which is the same as the class name here, which is telling you that this class is representing this ViewController on the storyboard. It is represented in code by the ViewController here. You can see in this file. And remember, if you drag a ViewController out onto the storyboard from this pane here, then there won't be any code associated with it until you make an association by creating a new file. But that's from the template that we used is actually done for us. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we are going to create some outlets. In fact, we only really need one outlet, which is for the message, because we need to be able to set this message on our view. So we hold the control key down and we drag out. And you can see that Xcode is pretty much only allowing us to put it in the right place, which is between this interface and the end. Now, because I'm in the implementation file with the M extension, this means that this property is private to this class, so it's not accessible as a public property. If I wanted to make it public, I would have to put it in the header, as we did with the model. Okay, I'm going to call this label message. Okay, we can make this weak in this case because the view controller itself will hold on to this, and we connect it. Okay. Right, so the purpose is to change this message when a user touches the button. So we now need to put an action in. So we have an outlet, IBOutlet, for the message, for the label, and now we want to add an action. So the same things. I'll do this slightly differently. Rather than click on the button here, I'm just going to do it from this inspector here. So I'm going to highlight the button, hold control down, and I'm going to drag this out in here. Now you notice if I would put it inside the interface, it's asking me to insert an outlet really in there. So because that's why it highlights there, because I could just be simply creating an outlet for the button. But in this case, I actually want to create an action. So if I go in between this method here, these two methods, then you can see the instruction change to insert action. So I'm going to just release that. And the action I'm going to call update message. Okay. And that's all fine. The event I'm going to choose is touch up inside. This is the type of event where if a user touches an area, this button area on their device, they can still cancel the event by dragging their fingers outside. So it's pretty much the equivalent of a click, if you like, if you think of it in mouse terms. Okay, and I'm going to connect that up. Okay. Right, we haven't made use of our model yet. Okay, but what we'll do is we will now make sure that we have the reference to our model. So inside the header, I must import the model here. So in which case it's just called message. It's called hello, sorry. So as soon as I start typing, I put H down, it should find that, and I can just either tab that along and then complete the line. And there we go, we've now imported hello. Okay, so we're going to now look at how we're going to make use of this class by creating an instance of it. So what we're going to do then, inside the view did load, which happens just after the view has loaded, we are going to alloc and initialize one of these objects. So first of all, it would be a good idea to have a private property for one of these objects so we're able to use it. wherever we like in the class. So we're going to do at property. I'm going to make this one strong because I want to hang on to this one. Non-atomic, which we'll always do pretty much. And I'm going to make one of these, have one of these objects which is called hello, like this, and I'm just going to call it hello, like so. Okay. So again, this will generate a getter and setter for this object, so I don't need to do any more work than that. What we're going to do now in this ViewDidLoad is we are going to create an object. So to access this property on this class, we use the self keyword. I'm going to do self.hello equals, and this is a standard way of initializing an object in Objective-C. You can split these up over 2 lines if you wish, but it's pretty much always done in a single line. Okay. So the first thing we do is we call the alloc on NSObject, which is effectively what we're doing here, which will sort out the business of memory for us. And then finally we call the initialization on the allocated object. So that's actually, initialization is actually a call on the object at this point. Okay, so now we have an initialized object. You must do this. The property, setting a property for an object alone will not give you an instance of the object. You have to go through this as well. That's pretty much all of the programming languages, in fact. Okay, then finally I'm going to use the controller to set a message on this model. And the message we're going to set is simply hello world, like so. Remember this ampersand sign here, so this at sign here means that we're using NS strings. If you do this in Swift, it's a bit different. You can drop that, and that'll work perfectly in the Swift string object. Okay. Okay. Finally, we are just going to use our action to update the message. So we're doing self.labelMessage.text equals, well, we now want to use our model, so our model is called hello. So we do self.hello.message. Remember, you can just press tab to complete the line, like so. And the code is now complete. So all that remains is to test it. So we're going to run the simulator again. Okay, so just to summarize, the user is going to touch, or I'm going to click in this instance on the button. Okay, that's going to call the action, which is going to, via the outlet, set the label to be hello world, as we can see there. Okay. So, just to reiterate, very simple tutorial just on the very basics of ideas of model view controller in iOS development. We have our storyboard here, okay, which we have put on some UI objects. We put UI button and a UI label on there. The UI object which we wish to have access through in our code, we have dragged out to using the control drag to create an IBOutlet, which is an interface builder outlet for historical reasons, which is this label, and we've put this in this private interface of the implementation file of the view controller. To make use of the simple model we made, we've also created a property of the model in our view controller. In the ViewDidLoad, we've then set the value, set the property on the model, in which case this is the simple message of hello world, and then we've finally used the model to here in this line, which is to update the user interface. It would be pretty unusual to do this, but often the model itself would be retrieving data possibly from core data. It may be the model's been changed by another controller at some point, or changed by this controller at some point. But in principle, this is the pattern. This is the basic pattern for the model view controller in iOS development in Objective-C.